Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The morning light spilled through the kitchen windows of the Vance residence, illuminating the granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. Kellen Vance stood by the coffee maker, watching the dark liquid drip into his mug. At 42, he maintained the physique of a man, 10 years younger, broad shoulders, flat stomach, strong jawline. His success was evident in every corner of the house he'd built for his wife, 15 years. That's how long it had taken him to transform from a nobody into one of the most respected businessmen in the city. 15 years of grinding work, calculated risks, and unwavering focus that he glanced at his watch 6:30 a.m. Vivian wouldn't be up for at least another 3 hours. Their schedules rarely aligned anymore, but Kellen had stopped considering that a coincidence months ago. The sound of his phone vibrating against the counter pulled his attention. Silas Boone, his oldest friend and business partner. "Morning," Kellen answered, voice low. "You're up early," Silas replied. "Couldn't sleep again." Kellen took a sip of his coffee. "Just getting an early start." "Right." The disbelief in Silas's voice was evident. "Listen, we need to talk." "Not over the phone." "The usual spot?" "Noon. I'll be there." Kellen ended the call just as he heard movement from upstairs. He frowned. Vivian was never up this early. He waited, listening to the soft padding of feet across the hardwood floor, followed by the sound of the shower starting. Without making a sound, he moved to the base of the stairs, then slowly ascended, step by step. Their bedroom door stood ajar. Her phone lay on a nightstand, its screen still illuminated. Kellen hesitated for only a moment before picking it up that a text message preview showed on the lock screen. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again. I got something special planned for." The rest was cut off, but it was enough. The contact was saved simply as B. Kellen's face betrayed nothing as he placed the phone back exactly as he'd found it. The shower continued to run that he returned to the kitchen, finished his coffee, and left for work without saying goodbye. In the driveway, he sat in his car for a full minute, hands gripping the steering wheel. His knuckles turned white, but his expression remained unchanged. Kellen's office at Vance Enterprises occupied the top floor of a downtown high-rise. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city he'd conquered. His desk, a solid piece of mahogany, faced the door position of power. Nothing in the room was accidental, as promised. Silas arrived at noon, closing the door behind him. At 50, Silas carried the weathered look of a man who'd seen it all. His salt and pepper beard framed a face that rarely smiled these days. "You look like hell," Silas remarked, dropping into one of the chairs opposite Kellen's desk. "Thanks." Kellen leaned back in his chair. "What couldn't wait?" Silas reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "You asked me to keep an eye out. Well, I found something." Kellen took the envelope but didn't open it immediately. "How bad?" "Bad enough that I'm here, aren't I?" Silas's eyes softened slightly. "Listen, brother, I've known you since college. I watched you build everything you have, and I watched you marry her despite everyone's warnings. Get to the point, Silas. Vivian's been seen around town with Bo Calloway." The name hung in the air between them. Bo Calloway, heir to a banking fortune, notorious playboy, and Kellen's business rival. A man who'd never worked a day in his life, but walked around like he owned the world. "How long?" Kellen asked, his voice level. "At least 3 months, according to my sources. They've been careful, but not careful enough." Silas nodded toward the envelope. "The evidence is there. Photos, dates, times, locations. They were at the Archer Hotel last week. She used the credit card you gave her for emergencies to pay for room service." Kellen finally opened the envelope and examined the contents. Photos showed Vivian entering the hotel lobby, Bo following minutes later. Another captured them at a restaurant, his hand on her thigh under the table. Receipt copies, timestamps, everything meticulously documented. "Women like that don't change, brother. I told you that before you married her." Silas's words weren't meant to hurt, just a reminder of a warning unheeded. Kellen remembered it well. 7 years ago, he'd fallen for Vivian's charm, her beauty, her seeming adoration of him. He'd ignored the red flags, Her expensive tastes, her flirtatious nature, her history of dating wealthy men. He convinced himself that with him, she'd be different, that he was a fool. "I've got more," Silas continued. "Calloway's been bragging to his inner circle. Says he's going to take everything Vance has, starting with his wife." Something cold settled in Kellen's chest. Not heartbreak he'd suspected for months. Not even anger that would come later. No, what he felt was resolve. "Thank you," he said, sliding the evidence into his desk drawer. "What are you going to do?" Silas asked that Kellen's eyes met his friend's. "Nothing. Yet. You're just going to let this continue. I'm going to wait. I'm going to watch. And when the time is right, I'll make my move." Silas studied him for a long moment. "I know that look. The last time I saw it was when Richards tried to steal our first major client. Richards declared bankruptcy 6 months later." "He did." Silas stood, straightening his jacket. "Just remember, this isn't business. This is personal." "In my experience," Kellen replied, "the two are never truly separate." After Silas left, Kellen remained at his desk, turning his wedding ring around his finger. He'd given Vivian everything. A life of luxury, financial security, his trust. And she'd thrown it away for Beau Calloway, a man who'd never built anything, who'd never known struggle or sacrifice. Kellen picked up his phone and dialed his lawyer. "Jack, it's Kellen Vance. I need you to prepare something for me. Confidentially." He paused. "Divorce papers. And I need to make some changes to our asset arrangements. How soon can we meet?" Over the next 2 weeks, Kellen became the perfect observer. He noted Vivian's new clothing designer pieces that hadn't come from his accounts. He cataloged her excuses for missed dinners and late nights. He watched her check her phone constantly, smiling at messages that weren't from him, but he said nothing, did nothing, just watched and waited at AT home. He maintained their routine. He asked about her day, listened to her lies, and nodded as though he believed every word. He kissed her cheek good morning and good night, never letting on that he knew. Meanwhile, he moved pieces into position. His lawyer secured their assets. His financial advisor shifted investments. His private investigator gathered more evidence. And all the while, Vivian suspected nothing. One evening, as they prepared for bed, she approached him with an unusual request. "I was thinking we could go out tomorrow night," Vivian said, applying cream to her face at her vanity. At 35, she was still strikingly beautiful, dark hair falling in waves, her figure maintained by daily workouts with an expensive personal trainer. "There's this new steakhouse downtown, Ember. Everyone's talking about it." Kellen looked up from his book. "Any special occasion?" Her eyes met his in the mirror. "Do we need one? We hardly go out together anymore." A convenient truth to mask her intentions. "Sure," he replied, turning a page. "I'll make a reservation." Vivian smiled, relief evident in the slight drop of her shoulders. "Perfect. 8 p.m. 8 p.m. it is." She came to bed and leaned over to kiss his cheek, her expensive perfume, another new addition, filling his nostrils. "I'm looking forward to it." As she settled under the covers and turned away from him, Kellen sent a text to Silas. "It's happening tomorrow night. Ember, 8 p.m. The reply came seconds later. "Are you sure?" Kellen's response was simple. Yes. He turned off the bedside lamp and stared at the ceiling in the darkness. Tomorrow night, everything would change. He'd allowed this charade to continue long enough. Now it was time for the reckoning. Ember lived up to its name. The restaurant's interior glowed with warm lighting, accented by actual flames that danced in glass fixtures along the walls. The dining room hummed with quiet conversations and a gentle clink of fine cutlery against china. Kellen and Vivian were seated at a prime table center of the room, but set apart enough for privacy. He'd arranged it specifically, wanting visibility for what would follow. "This is nice," Vivian said, looking genuinely pleased as she settled into her chair. She wore a new dress, deep red, clinging to her curves, obviously expensive. Her hair was styled differently, and her makeup was heavier than usual. She was dressed to impress, but not for her husband. "It is," Kellen agreed, studying the wine list with feigned interest. A waiter approached, and Kellen ordered a bottle of Cabernet. Vivian fidgeted with her napkin, her eyes darting to the entrance every few minutes. "Expecting someone?" he asked casually. She startled slightly. "What?" "No, just taking in the atmosphere." The waiter returned with their wine, pouring a taste for Kellen's approval before filling both glasses. Vivian immediately took a large sip, then checked her phone under the table. "Is work bothering you on our date night?" Kellen asked, knowing full well she wasn't checking work messages. Vivian's job as a part-time event coordinator hardly required urgent attention at 8 p.m. "No, just making sure my assistant handled the Johnson wedding details." Another lie delivered smoothly. They ordered their meals filet mignon for him, salmon for her. As they waited, Kellen directed the conversation towards seemingly innocent topics, watching her grow increasingly distracted. "How's your friend Maria? Still dating that architect?" he asked. Vivian blinked. Yes. I think so." "You think so? I thought you had lunch with her last week." A flicker of panic crossed her face. "Oh, right. Yes, they're still together. She just didn't talk about him much." Another lie. There had been no lunch with Maria. The credit card statement showed Vivian at a hotel restaurant across town at the time she claimed to be with her friend. Their meals arrived, providing a momentary distraction. Kellen cut into his steak methodically, each slice precise. Vivian picked at her salmon, her appetite apparently diminished by anticipation. She checked her phone again, this time not bothering to hide it. "Is everything all right?" Kellen asked, his tone concerned but his eyes cold. "Yes, fine. Just..." She forced a smile. "I'm here with you. That's what matters." Kellen nodded and took a bite of his steak. "Excellent cut," he commented. "Would you like to try some?" Before she could answer, Vivian's phone lit up on the table. She snatched it quickly, but not before Kellen caught the contact name, B. "Excuse me," she said, rising from her seat. "Ladies' room." Kellen watched her hurry away, phone clutched in her hand. He checked his watch. Right on schedule, that he continued eating calmly, cutting each piece of steak with deliberate precision. 3 minutes passed. 5. 8. When Vivian returned, her cheeks were flushed and her eyes bright. She'd refreshed her lipstick. "Sorry about that," she said, sitting down. "Where were we?" "You were about to try my steak," Kellen reminded her, though she clearly had no intention of doing so. "Oh, right." She waved her hand dismissively. "Maybe later. This salmon is quite filling." She'd barely touched it. Kellen nodded and continued eating. The tension between them grew, though only he knew why. Vivian's eyes kept darting to the entrance, checking her watch subtly. "Are you in a hurry?" he asked. "No, not at all." She took a sip of wine. "Actually, I was thinking we could skip dessert and just head home early. Have some private time." The suggestion would have sounded genuine to anyone who didn't know what Kellen knew. She wanted to end the dinner before whatever she had planned could happen. Too late. "I think we should stay for dessert," Kellen insisted. "I heard their chocolate souffle is outstanding." Vivian's smile faltered. "Well, if you insist." Just then, a shadow fell across their table. Kellen looked up, his expression neutral despite the surge of cold anger that flowed through him. Well, I was wondering when I'd finally get to meet the famous Kellen Vance." The voice was smooth, confident, arrogant, exactly as Kellen had expected. Beau Calloway stood beside their table, dressed in an Italian suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his smile practiced and predatory. At 38, he made a career of spending his family's money and taking things that didn't belong to him. Kellen set his glass down slowly, his eyes never leaving Beau's face. Vivian froze, her wineglass halfway to her lips. This wasn't part of her plan. Her eyes darted between the two men, panic evident in her expression. "Beau," she whispered, the single word confirming everything. "Surprise, Viv," Beau said, his eyes still on Kellen. "Thought I'd join the party." He extended his hand toward Kellen. "Beau Calloway, though I'm sure you know that already." Kellen ignored the outstretched hand. "I know exactly who you are." Beau's smile didn't falter. He withdrew his hand and instead placed it on the back of Vivian's chair, his fingers brushing against her bare shoulder. She shivered at the contact, but didn't pull away. "Kellen," Vivian started, her voice shaky. "This is just a coincidence. Beau is a business associate." Beau finished for her, his tone mocking. among other things. Several nearby diners had noticed the interaction, conversations quieting as attention shifted toward their table. "Beau, please," Vivian hissed. "Not here." "Why not here?" Beau asked, moving closer to her. Without hesitation, he reached for her hand, taking it in his. "Your husband deserves to know the truth, doesn't he?" Kellen saw the way Vivian's breath hitched, the way her fingers trembled in Beau's grasp, not from fear, but from familiarity. They'd held hands before, many times. That was all the confirmation he needed, though he'd already known. "Why are you hesitating, Viv?" Beau's lips curled into a smirk as he addressed her. "You know I'm far better than your loser husband. First, we'll dance, and then I'll show you what I can really do." The restaurant had grown quieter. More people were watching now. Kellen's jaw tightened, but his face remained unreadable. No anger, no reaction, just cold calculation. "Let go of my wife's hand," he said, his voice low but clear. Beau's smirk widened. "What if she doesn't want me to?" He leaned down toward Vivian. "Do you want her to let go, Viv? After all we've shared these past months?" The color drained from Vivian's face. "Beau, stop it. This isn't what we discussed." "Plans change," Beau replied, his eyes now on Kellen. "I'm tired of sneaking around." "Aren't you?" Kellen set his napkin down beside his plate and stood slowly. He wasn't as tall as Beau, but his presence was more commanding. Years of building a business from nothing had given him a quiet strength that Beau's inherited wealth couldn't match. "I believe I asked you to let go of my wife's hand," Kellen repeated. "Or what?" Beau challenged, tightening his grip on Vivian's fingers. "What exactly do you think you're going to do about it, Vance?" The restaurant had fallen completely silent now. Waiters stood frozen. Diners watched with held breath. It was the kind of scene people would talk about for weeks, exactly as Kellen had planned. "This is my last warning," Kellen said, his voice even. "Let go." Beau laughed, the sound grating. "You built yourself up from nothing, didn't you, Vance? Impressive. But at the end of the day, you're still nothing. That's why your wife came to my bed. That's why she—" And then Kellen moved. There was no warning, no telegraph of his intentions. One moment he was standing still, the next his hand had latched onto Beau's wrist with vice-like precision. Before Beau could react, Kellen twisted sharply, applying pressure to exactly the right point. A sickening crack echoed through the silent restaurant that Beau's confident smirk vanished, replaced by a look of shock that quickly morphed into agony. He crumpled to his knees, a scream tearing from his throat as he clutched his shattered wrist. Vivian jumped up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Kellen, what the hell?" Kellen slowly released Beau's broken wrist. He wasn't rushed. He wasn't panicked. His movements were deliberate, controlled. He looked down at Beau, who was now gasping in pain, the arrogance gone from his face, replaced by fear and disbelief. "I warned you," Kellen said simply. Beau tried to speak, but could only manage a whimper. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he cradled his twisted hand. Vivian turned to Kellen, her expression a mix of shock, anger, and fear. "Kellen, I can explain." "This isn't." But he didn't even look at her. His gaze remained fixed on Beau. Then, in a voice colder than death, he said, "Touch my wife again, and you'll be eating through a straw." The threat hung in the air, all the more terrifying for its quiet delivery. Beau whimpered, his once polished image now reduced to a sniveling mess on the floor. A waiter had rushed over, and someone was calling for a doctor. Vivian grabbed Kellen's arm. "Kellen, please. We need to talk about this." "I never meant." He finally turned to look at her, his eyes devoid of emotion. "There's nothing to talk about." She flinched at the emptiness in his gaze. "Please, just listen to me." It wasn't supposed to, but he didn't want to hear it. He carefully removed her hand from his arm, picked up his whiskey from the table, and drained it in one swallow. Then he threw his napkin onto the table and calmly walked away. "Kellen, wait." Vivian called after him, her voice breaking, but he didn't stop, didn't turn around, just continued walking, his steps measured and unhurried, through the restaurant and out the door, leaving her with the mess she created, just as he'd planned. Outside, the night air was cool against Kellen's face. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, adjusting his cuffs. One had become slightly misaligned during the confrontation. A valet approached, but Kellen waved him off. He needed to walk. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Silas. It's done, Kellen answered without preamble. Witnesses? Silas asked. At least 30. Plus security cameras. Good. And you're sure Calloway made the first move? He put his hands on my wife in public and verbally admitted to their affair. Then threatened me. Self-defense is clear. Silas was silent for a moment. And Vivian, exactly as expected. She didn't deny it. What now? Kellen looked back at the restaurant, where commotion was visible through the windows. Now we move to phase 2. Is everything ready? All set. One call from you and it starts. Make the call, Kellen said. I want everything in motion before she gets home. Consider it done. Silas paused. Are you okay? Kellen considered the question. Was he angry? Yes, but it was a controlled anger, channeled into his plan. Was he hurt? Perhaps, but that emotion felt distant, almost academic. What he felt most strongly was resolve and determination to see this through to the end. I'm fine, he answered truthfully. I'll call you tomorrow. He ended the call and continued walking, each step taking him further from a life he'd shared with Vivian and closer to what came next. The night air filled his lungs, clean and clarifying. Betrayal had a price. And Kellen Vance always collected. The ride home from Ember was the longest 20 minutes of Vivian's life. The taxi driver kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, clearly recognizing her distress, but wisely choosing not to comment. Her hands trembled as she tried calling Kellen for the 5th time. Once again, it went straight to voicemail. Kellen, please, she said after the beep. We need to talk about this. Call me back. She ended the call and stared out the window at the passing streetlights. This wasn't how tonight was supposed to go. Bo wasn't supposed to show up at the restaurant. He was supposed to wait until she contacted him later, after she'd had a chance to soften Kellen up, to prepare him. Not that she'd ever planned to tell Kellen the whole truth. Just enough to make him realize their marriage needed work, that they needed counseling, that she needed more attention, more excitement, more freedom. The taxi pulled into the curved driveway of the Vance residence. Vivian paid the driver and stepped out, her designer heels crunching on the gravel. The house loomed before her, all sleek modern lines and expansive windows. Usually, the sight filled her with pride, proof she'd secured a successful husband, a life of luxury. Tonight, it felt cold, uninviting. She fumbled with her keys, noticing immediately that Kellen's car wasn't in the garage. Where had he gone? Back to the office, probably. He always retreated to work when he was angry. That was fine. She'd have time to prepare her story, to practice the tears and explanations that had worked on him in the past. By tomorrow, she could convince him this was all Bo's fault, that she'd been manipulated, or drunk, or lonely because Kellen worked too much. Vivian pushed open the front door and reached for the light switch. Nothing happened. She tried again. Still darkness. Kellen, she called out, her voice echoing in the quiet house. No response. Using her phone's flashlight, she made her way through the foyer toward the kitchen. The house was eerily silent, the usual background hum of appliances noticeably absent. The power was out? Impossible. They had a generator that automatically kicked in during outages. Her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced down, hoping it was Kellen. Instead, it was from American Express. Alert! Your account has been closed. Please contact customer service for details. Her heart skipped a beat. She quickly opened her banking app, entered her password, and stared in disbelief at the screen. Access denied. What the hell? She muttered, trying again. Same result, that a sudden thought struck her. She rushed to the kitchen drawer, where they kept the emergency cash and spare credit cards. Empty. Panic rising, she hurried upstairs to their bedroom. When she flipped the light switch there, the lights came on. So the power outage was selective. Deliberate. The bedroom looked different. It took her a moment to realize why Kellen's things were gone. His watch case, cufflinks, even the books on his nightstand. His side of the closet stood empty. Hangers swinging gently from her abrupt entrance. On her pillow lay an envelope. Her name was written on it in Kellen's precise handwriting. With shaking fingers, she tore it open and pulled out a thick stack of papers. Even before reading the heading, she knew what they were: Petition for dissolution of marriage. No, she whispered, flipping through the document. It was comprehensive, brutal in its thoroughness. Kellen had planned this. Not today, not after the restaurant scene. He'd planned this days, maybe weeks ago. Her phone rang. Beau's name flashed on the screen. "Beau," she answered, relief washing over her. "Thank God. Are you okay? Where are you? Am I okay?" His voice was tight with pain and anger. "No, Vivian, I'm not fucking okay. Your psycho husband broke my wrist in front of half the city's elite. I'm at the hospital. I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't know he would." "Save it." Beau cut her off. "This is a mess. My lawyer says I should press charges." "Press charges? But you provoked him, Beau. You practically announced our affair to the entire restaurant. Because you said you were going to tell him anyway." Beau hissed. "You said you were ready to leave him, that you were just waiting for the right moment." "I was," Vivian insisted, though they both knew it was a lie. She'd never planned to leave Kellen's money, just to enjoy Beau's excitement on the side. "Whatever. Listen, I need to deal with this situation. I'll call you tomorrow." "Wait, Beau, I need." But he'd already hung up. Vivian sank on the edge of the bed, the divorce papers still clutched in her hand. This couldn't be happening. Kellen was supposed to fight for her, to beg her not to leave him, to offer her anything to stay. Instead, he'd calmly walked away and set in motion what was clearly a meticulously planned exit strategy. Her phone buzzed with another alert. Then another, and another alert. "Your Visa account has been closed at alert. Your authorized user status has been revoked on the following account at alert. Payment declined for BMW Financial Services. In growing horror, she pulled up her email. There was a notice from the luxury car dealership that her vehicle was being repossessed due to contract violation. The car wasn't even in her name. It was a leased vehicle provided by Kellen's company. She ran to the window just in time to see a tow truck pulling into the driveway. No, she muttered, grabbing her purse and rushing downstairs. By the time she reached the front door, two men were already hooking her white BMW to the tow truck. "Stop," she called out, rushing toward them. "There's been a mistake." The older of the two men looked up, his expression neutral. "No mistake, ma'am. We have the paperwork right here." He held up a folder. "Vehicle to be repossessed by order of Vance Enterprises." "But that's my husband's company," she protested. "I'm his wife." "Sorry, ma'am. We're just doing our job. At least let me get my things from the car." He nodded, and she quickly retrieved her designer sunglasses and a few personal items from the glove compartment. Within minutes, her $85,000 car was being towed away, leaving her stranded at her own home. Or was it even her home anymore? She returned inside and went through the divorce papers more carefully. There it was in black and white. The house was solely in Kellen's name. She'd never bothered with the paperwork when they bought it, happy to let him handle the boring details. Those boring details now meant she had no claim to the property. The wave of nausea hit her. She reached for her phone again, scrolling frantically through her contacts. Who could she call? Not her friends. Most were actually Kellen's friends, business associates, and their wives. They'd side with him in an instant. Her family? Her parents lived 3 states away and had never approved of her lifestyle. Her sister had warned her years ago that her behavior would eventually catch up with her. There was Beau, but he was clearly in no state to help her. And if his tone was any indication, he was already distancing himself from the situation. She was alone. The sound of a key in the front door made her heart leap. "Kellen." She rushed to the foyer, ready to plead her case, to beg if necessary. But it wasn't Kellen that a man in a security uniform stood there, looking uncomfortable. "Mrs. Vance?" "Yes." "Who are you?" "Mike Dawson from Secure Tech. Mr. Vance hired us to change the security system and monitor the property." He hesitated. "He asked me to inform you that you have until noon tomorrow to remove your personal belongings from the premises. He's locking me out of my own house." Vivian's voice rose in disbelief. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm just following instructions." He handed her a small card. "This temporary access code will work until noon tomorrow. After that, the locks will be changed." After the security man left, Vivian stood in the foyer, trembling with a mixture of fear and rage. How had this happened so quickly? How had Kellen orchestrated all of this without her noticing? The answer was simple. He'd been planning this for weeks, maybe months. While she was sneaking around with Beau, Kellen had been methodically preparing to cut her out of his life. Her phone rang again. Unknown number. Hello, she answered cautiously. Vivian Vance. A woman's crisp, professional voice came through the speaker. Yes, who's this? Diana Mercer, from Mercer and Associates law firm. I've been retained by Kellen Vance regarding your divorce proceedings. I'm calling to schedule a meeting to discuss the terms. Terms? What terms? He can't just throw me out with nothing. I'm entitled to half of everything. There was a pause on the other end. Mrs. Vance, I suggest you retain legal counsel immediately. The prenuptial agreement you signed is quite clear about infidelity clauses. The prenup, of course. She'd signed it willingly 7 years ago, barely glancing at the document. Would it matter? She'd never planned to cheat, or at least, never planned to get caught. I'll have my lawyer contact you, Vivian said, trying to sound confident. Very well. Please note that we're prepared to provide evidence of your extramarital activities if this goes to court. Mr. Vance would prefer to keep this private, but he's willing to make the matter public if necessary. After the call ended, Vivian sat on the stairs, her mind racing. Evidence? What evidence did Kellen have? Her phone buzzed with an email notification. From Kellen. With shaking fingers, she opened it. There were no words, just attachments. She clicked on the first one. Photos. Her and Beau entering the Archer Hotel. Timestamps dates. Another of them at a restaurant, his hand on her thigh. Text message screenshots. Hotel receipts. Kellen had proof. Undeniable, damning proof. Vivian let her phone fall to the floor as reality crashed down around her. Her credit cards were canceled. Her car was gone. Her home wouldn't be hers after tomorrow. Her lover was distancing himself. And her husband, her successful, wealthy husband who had given her everything, had cut her out of his life with surgical precision. She had nothing, and Kellen had planned it all. Kellen Vance sat in his attorney's office, examining the documents spread before him. Jack Harmon, his lawyer of 15 years, watched him with a mixture of admiration and concern. Are you sure about this, Kellen? Jack asked. Once we file, there's no going back. Calloway will fight it with everything he has. Good, Kellen replied, signing the last page. Let him fight. It'll only make his fall more public. 3 days had passed since the incident at Ember. As planned, Vivian had been removed from his home and financial accounts. The divorce proceedings were underway, with his legal team ready for any challenge she might mount. But that was only half of his strategy. Now it was time for Beau Calloway to learn the true cost of taking what belonged to Kellen Vance. The lawsuit is solid, Jack continued, gathering the signed papers. Assault, defamation, emotional distress, all well documented with witness statements and security footage. But Calloway has deep pockets and powerful connections. His family's been in banking for generations. I'm aware. Kellen's tone was even. What's the timeline? We'll file today. Service of process will likely happen tomorrow. Expect his legal team to contact us within hours demanding we drop the case. They'll offer money. I don't want his money. Kellen leaned forward. I want his reputation, his standing, his peace of mind. Jack nodded, understanding. The press will be all over this. Story has everything they love: wealthy businessman, public altercation, infidelity. Are you prepared for that? I've already given an exclusive statement to the Business Journal. It'll run tomorrow morning, framing the narrative exactly as we want it. The lawyer smiled slightly. As always, Kellen was 3 steps ahead. There's something else you should know, Jack said, lowering his voice despite them being alone in his office. My contact at the Securities and Exchange Commission is very interested in the information you provided about Calloway's financial activities. As they should be, the evidence is substantial. If the SEC opens a formal investigation based on this, Calloway will know someone gave them the information. He'll suspect you. Kellen stood, straightening his jacket. Let him suspect. By the time he figures it out, it'll be too late. You're not just looking to win a lawsuit, are you? Jack's gaze was steady. You're looking to destroy him completely. He made his choice when he pursued my wife and then publicly humiliated me, Kellen answered. Now he'll face the consequences. As he left the law office, Kellen's phone rang. Silas. The SEC is moving faster than expected, Silas said without preamble. My contact says they're sending notice of investigation to Callaway Capital tomorrow morning. Perfect timing, right when the Business Journal article hits. I also leaked some preliminary details to that financial blogger Callaway hates Martin Turner. He's already posting hints about a major scandal brewing at one of the city's oldest financial institutions. Good. What about Vivian? Silas hesitated. She's been calling everyone, trying to find someone to take her in. No takers so far. Most people don't want to get on your bad side. And Callaway? Has she been in contact with him? Multiple calls, all unanswered according to our source. He's distancing himself. As expected, Kellen entered his car. Keep me updated. The next morning, Kellen took his time getting ready in his temporary apartment. He'd moved into one of his company's executive suites, a sleek, minimalist space downtown with high security and complete privacy. He hadn't slept at the house since discovering Vivian's affair weeks ago, though she never noticed his gradual removal of personal items. Dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, he reviewed the morning news on his tablet. The Business Journal article was front and center. Business titan Kellen Vance sues banking heir Bo Callaway. Assault and affair allegations rock City's elite. The article was exactly as he'd crafted it, with the journalist factual yet damning, portraying Kellen as the wronged husband forced to defend himself against Callaway's aggressive behavior. Several witnesses from the restaurant were quoted, all confirming Callaway had been the aggressor, and no mention of Vivian's role, other than being referred to as Vance's wife. That was deliberate. She wasn't important enough to name. His phone chimed with a text from Jack. Callaway, served with lawsuit papers at hospital. His attorney already called demanding meeting. Perfect. Next came a message from his contact at the SEC. Investigation notice delivered to Callaway Capital. Initial response is panic. Everything was proceeding exactly according to plan. By mid-morning, financial news sites were running stories about the SEC investigation into Callaway Capital. The company's stock had already dropped 7%, and trading volume was unusually high. Kellen's phone rang an unfamiliar number. Kellen Vance, he answered. You son of a bitch. Bo Callaway's voice was tight with fury. Mr. Callaway, I was wondering when you'd call. You think you could destroy me? Do you have any idea who my family is? What kind of power we have in this city? Kellen remained calm. I'm well aware of your family's history. 3 generations of wealth, built on your grandfather's success. What a shame you'll be the one to bring it all down. These allegations are bullshit, and you know it. The SEC won't find anything. No, that's not what your CFO, Thomas Willard, thinks. He seems quite concerned about certain creative accounting practices you've implemented. There was a pause on the line. You've been talking, Tom? I've been talking to many people, Bo. You'd be surprised how willing your employees are to share information when properly motivated. This is because of Vivian. Bo's tone changed, becoming almost pleading. Listen, it wasn't serious. Just a fling. She came after me, you know, said you were boring, that you couldn't satisfy her. And yet you're the one who's been served with a lawsuit. Well, my company's stock rose 3 points this morning. Kellen's voice remained even. Try keep up, Bo. This isn't about Vivian anymore. This is about you making a critical error in judgment. What do you want? Money? Name your price. I don't want your money, Bo. I want you to experience exactly what you try to take from me, everything you value, everything you've built, everything you are. You can't do this, Bo hissed. I already have. Check your company's stock price. There was silence on the line, presumably as Bo checked. Then a strangled sound. 10% drop? That's not possible. It's just the beginning, Kellen said. By the end of the week, your investors will be fleeing, your board will be calling for your resignation, and your family name will be synonymous with fraud. I'll fight this. Please do. The more you struggle, the more public it becomes. Kellen ended the call and turned to the window, gazing out at the city skyline. His city. He'd built his place in it from nothing, through strategy, hard work, and intelligence. Bo Callaway was about to learn what happens when you challenge someone who had fought for everything they had. Over the next week, Kellen watched Bo Callaway's world unravel with methodical precision. Day 2. 3 major investors pulled funding from Callaway Capital, citing concerns about the SEC investigation. Day 3. The board of directors called an emergency meeting. By that evening, they'd issued a statement expressing full confidence in Bo's leadership, the corporate equivalent of a kiss of death. Day 4. The financial blogger Martin Turner published a detailed expose on Callaway Capital's questionable investment practices, complete with internal documents showing Bo had knowingly misrepresented returns to clients. Day 5. 2 of Callaway Capital's executive team resigned, with carefully worded statements about pursuing other opportunities and personal reasons. Kellen monitored it all from his office, receiving regular updates from Silas and his network of contacts. He made no public statements beyond the initial article, letting the situation unfold naturally now that he'd set it in motion. On day 6, Silas arrived at Kellen's office with fresh news. The SEC has expanded their investigation, Silas reported, taking a seat across from Kellen's desk. They're now looking into personal accounts, not just corporate practices. Right on schedule. Kellen nodded. And the board? Meeting again tomorrow. Word is they're discussing a temporary replacement while Bo addresses these unfounded allegations. Silas made air quotes around the corporate speak. Basically, they're pushing him out. His father, Roland Callaway, has returned from his European vacation. He's not happy. Kellen smiled slightly. Roland Callaway, now in his 70s, had built Callaway Capital into a respected institution before handing control to his son. The old man had standards, principles that Bo had neglected. What about Vivian? Any contact? Silas shook his head. Not with Callaway. She's moved in with some friend temporarily. Been trying to access funds, but your legal team has everything locked up tight. Good. Are you going to give her anything in the divorce? She'll be destitute otherwise. Kellen considered this. The prenup allows for a small settlement in cases of infidelity. She'll get enough to rent a modest apartment, nothing more. She made her choice. The intercom buzzed. Kellen's assistant's voice came through. Mr. Vance, Roland Callaway is here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment. Kellen and Silas exchanged surprised glances. Send him in, Kellen replied. Roland Callaway entered the office with the dignity of his position, despite his obvious fatigue. At 73, he still cut an impressive figure, tall, silver-haired, impeccably dressed in a classic suit that spoke of old money and traditional values. Mr. Callaway, Kellen stood, offering his hand. This is unexpected. Roland shook his hand firmly. I'll be direct, Mr. Vance. I know what my son did, and I know what you're doing in response. Kellen gestured to the visitor's chair. Please sit. Would you like something to drink? No, thank you. Roland sat, his posture stiff. I've spent the last 2 days reviewing everything: the incident at the restaurant, the affair with your wife, and more concerningly, the financial irregularities at my company. Kellen remained silent, waiting for him to continue. Bo has always been reckless, Roland said, genuine regret in his voice. I thought giving him responsibility would mature him. I was wrong. Your son made choices, Mr. Callaway. Now he's facing the consequences. Yes, and deservedly so. Roland's direct acknowledgement surprised Kellen. However, Callaway Capital employs over 300 people, and our clients trust us with their financial futures. The company shouldn't suffer for my son's misdeeds. What are you proposing? Bo will resign as CEO, effective immediately. I'll return from retirement temporarily to stabilize the company. Any financial improprieties will be disclosed fully to the SEC and restitution made. Kellen studied the older man. And in return, I ask that you drop the personal lawsuit against my son. The civil charges, not the SEC investigation that must proceed naturally. He needs to face those consequences. Roland's expression was pained but resolute. I'm not asking for mercy, Mr. Vance. Just containment. For the sake of the company and its employees. It was a reasonable request, and one Kellen had anticipated. The lawsuit had served its purpose, a public humiliation of Bo and the first domino in his downfall. The SEC investigation would do the rest. I'll consider it, Mr. Callaway. On one condition. Name it. Bo leaves the city. Permanently. No position at any financial institution, no public role, no social presence. Roland nodded slowly. I can arrange that. A distant cousin in Seattle has a small real estate firm. Bo can start over there, away from the finance world entirely. Then we have an agreement. They shook hands. The matter settled between men who understood business and consequences. After Roland left, Silas looked at Kellen with new respect. You're letting him off easy. Am I? Kellen turned to the window again. Bo Calloway will lose his position, his reputation, his social standing, and be exiled from the only world he's ever known. His father, the man whose respect he's always craved, just negotiated his surrender and punishment with me. No, Silas. I'm not letting him off easy. I'm ensuring his punishment is complete. What had begun as revenge had indeed become annihilation. 2 weeks after the night at Ember, rain pounded against the windows of Kellen's temporary apartment. He sat at his desk, reviewing quarterly reports, the soft jazz playing in the background nearly drowned out by the storm. The intercom buzzed. Mr. Vance, there's a woman here insisting on seeing you, the building's security guard announced. She claims to be your wife. Kellen checked his watch. Nearly midnight. Is she causing a disturbance? No, sir, but she's quite persistent. And, well, she's soaking wet from the rain. Kellen considered his options. He could send her away legally. They were still married, but in every other sense, that relationship was over. Or he could hear what she had to say, if only to close this chapter completely. Send her up? He decided. He continued working, not bothering to prepare for her arrival. Let her see him unmoved, unaffected by her presence. The knock came 3 minutes later, tentative, nothing like Vivian's usual confident rapping. Kellen took his time walking to the door. When he opened it, the sight before him would have shocked him if he were capable of being shocked by Vivian anymore. She stood in the hallway, drenched from the rain. Her designer clothes, now significantly less impressive than 2 weeks ago, clung to her body. Her hair hung in wet strings around her face, and her mascara had run, creating dark streaks down her cheeks. Without her usual perfect makeup and styled hair, she looked older, smaller somehow. Kellen, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Can I come in? He studied her for a long moment, then stepped aside without a word. Vivian entered, leaving a trail of water on the polished floor. She looked around the apartment, sleek, minimalist, masculine. No touches of her anywhere, as if she'd never been part of his life. Nice place, she said, an attempt at her old casual confidence that fell flat. Kellen closed the door, but didn't offer her a seat. What do you want, Vivian? She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering slightly. I've been trying to reach you for days. I've been busy, too busy to return your wife's calls. Ex-wife, essentially. The paperwork is just a formality at this point. Her face crumpled slightly at his cold tone. Kellen, please, can we talk about this? Really talk? I know, I made a mistake. A mistake. His eyebrow raised slightly. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or saying something hurtful in anger. What you did was a deliberate series of choices, made over months, with full awareness of the consequences, if discovered. I was unhappy. She tried, her voice taking on a pleading quality he'd never heard from her before. You were always working, always focused on the business. I felt neglected, yet you never mentioned feeling neglected, never suggested counseling, never indicated any problem at all. His voice remained calm, factual. Instead, you chose to seek attention elsewhere while continuing to enjoy the lifestyle my work provided. It wasn't like that, she protested weakly. Wasn't it? Tell me, Vivian, if Bo had been a struggling artist instead of a wealthy playboy, would you have given him a second glance? She had no answer for that. I thought not. Kellen moved toward his desk, putting physical distance between them. Now, again, what do you want? Vivian wiped at her smeared makeup, succeeding only in spreading it further. My friend asked me to leave her place. She said I've been there too long. That's not my concern. The hotel I was staying at, they wouldn't let me extend my stay. My credit card was declined. Again, not my problem. Kellen, her voice broke, genuine desperation showing through. I have nowhere else to go. For the first time since she'd arrived, Kellen really looked at her. Beyond the wet clothes and ruined makeup, he saw the truth. Vivian was broken. Not just financially, but fundamentally. The confident, manipulative woman who'd played him for a fool was gone, replaced by someone who'd lost everything and only now realized the value of what she'd thrown away in another life, with another man. This might have been the moment of reconciliation. The tearful apology, the reluctant forgiveness, the second chance. But Kellen Vance wasn't that man. "Did you go to Bo?" he asked, already knowing the answer. Her silence was confirmation enough. "And he turned you away," Kellen continued. "Not surprising. Men like Bo don't stick around when things get difficult. They move on to the next conquest, the next thrill. He won't even take my calls," she admitted, a fresh tear sliding down her cheek. "No one will. Everyone's afraid of angering you." "Smart of them. Kellen, please." She took a step toward him, hands outstretched. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm begging you. Help me, just until I can figure something out. I don't have anywhere to go." For a brief moment, he wondered what it would be like to accept her plea, to show mercy, to be the bigger person, to let her stay until she found her footing. But then he remembered every lie, every betrayal, every moment she'd laughed at his expense with Bo Calloway, every time she'd left their bed to text her lover, every time she'd used Kellen's money to fund her affair. And some betrayals couldn't be forgiven. "That's not my problem," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. Vivian stared at him, disbelief mixing with her desperation. "What? Your current situation is the direct result of your choices, Vivian. I didn't force you to cheat. I didn't force you to lie. Those were your decisions, and now you're facing the consequences. You can't just throw me away," she cried, her voice rising. 7 years, Kellen. 7 years of marriage. 7 years of me believing in something that wasn't real. He moved to the door and opened it. "You should go. Kellen, please." She was openly sobbing now, makeup running further down her face. "I have nowhere to go. It's pouring rain. I don't even have enough money for a hotel tonight." He reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and extracted $300 bills. He held them out to her. "This will cover a decent hotel for a few nights. The divorce settlement will provide enough for a small apartment and basic living expenses until you find work." His voice remained businesslike, as if discussing a minor transaction. "That's all you'll get from me." She looked at the money, then back at his face, searching for any sign of the man who had once loved her. She found none. Slowly, she took the bills, her fingers trembling. "I really did love you, Kellen. In my way, your way wasn't enough." He gestured to the open door. "Goodbye, Vivian." She stood there for a moment longer, perhaps hoping he would change his mind. When it became clear he wouldn't, she walked to the door, pausing in the threshold. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for everything." Kellen said nothing. He simply closed the door behind her, shutting her out of his life completely. Through the heavy wood, he could hear her broken sobs as she made her way to the elevator. He waited, listening as the sounds faded away. Then he returned to his desk and his work, exactly as he'd been before she arrived. Some might call him cold, unfeeling. But Kellen knew the truth. This wasn't about emotion. It was about justice, about consequences, about the price of betrayal. And he always collected. 3 months had passed since Kellen Vance had systematically dismantled Bo Calloway's life. Spring had given way to summer, bringing with it the kind of heat that made the city shimmer through waves rising from the pavement. Kellen stood in his office, surveying the skyline he'd conquered. Vance Enterprises had not only survived the scandal, but thrived. Their stock was up 15%, 3 new major clients had signed on, and his reputation as a businessman not to be crossed had only strengthened. The intercom on his desk buzzed. "Mr. Vance," his assistant's voice came through. "Mr. Boone is here to see you." "Send him in." Silas entered, tablet in hand. Despite the summer heat, he wore his customary dark suit, though he'd conceded to the season by foregoing a tie. "You look pleased with yourself," Silas noted, taking a seat across from Kellen's desk. "Just appreciating the view," Kellen replied, moving back to his chair. "What's the update?" Silas tapped on his tablet. "Roland Calloway has officially restructured the company. Calloway Capital is now Calloway and Associates. New board, new management team, new compliance protocols. And Bo, that's the interesting part. Silas leaned forward. He never showed up in Seattle. The cousin's real estate firm has no record of him ever reporting for work. Kellen raised an eyebrow. Where is he? Off the grid for nearly 6 weeks. Until this morning. Silas slid the tablet across the desk. Take a look. The screen showed a grainy image from a security camera. A man in dark sunglasses and a baseball cap, but unmistakably Bo Calloway, withdrawing cash from an ATM less than 10 blocks from Vance Enterprises. He's back in the city, Kellen said, studying the image. Against his father's explicit instructions and the terms of your agreement. Silas took the tablet back. Roland doesn't know. He thinks Bo is still in Seattle, keeping a low profile. When was this taken? Yesterday afternoon. Kellen considered this information. Any unusual activity around our properties or offices? Nothing yet. But if he's back and withdrawing cash instead of using cards, he's trying to stay under the radar. That suggests planning, not just a casual visit. Increase security at all locations, Kellen instructed. Double the overnight patrols at the main office and the waterfront project. Full camera coverage, no blind spots. Already done, Silas confirmed. I took the liberty of hiring 2 additional security teams when I saw the ATM footage. Good. Kellen checked his watch. Any word from our friends at the SEC? Final settlement negotiations are happening today. From what my source says, Callaway Capital will pay a substantial fine, but criminal charges are unlikely for the company, at least. And for Bo, personally, still on the table. The evidence clearly shows he was acting without board approval on the most questionable transactions. Kellen nodded, satisfied. The legal consequences were proceeding exactly as planned. Bo's father had salvaged the company at the cost of his son's reputation and future, just as Kellen had anticipated. What about Vivian? Kellen asked. Working as a hostess at Valentino's, Silas replied. Minimum wage plus tips. Sharing an apartment with 2 roommates in the East Side District. Has she attempted contact recently? No, not since your conversation at the apartment. Kellen turned back to the window, watching the city below. Bo's return concerns me. He's impulsive, emotional, and now desperate. You think he's here for revenge? I would be, Kellen said simply, if someone had taken everything from me. Should we alert the police about his return? Not yet. Let's see what he does first. Kellen's reflection in the glass showed no concern, only calculation. He'll make a move soon. When he does, we'll be ready. The move came 3 days later. Kellen was at home, reviewing quarterly projections in his study when his phone rang. The security company's number flashed on the screen. Vance, he answered. Sir, we have a situation at the main office building. The head of security reported. Perimeter alarm was triggered on the service entrance. Security cameras show 3 men forcing entry. They're currently on the executive floor. Have you contacted the police? Yes, sir. Units are on their way. ETA 4 minutes. Good. I'm coming in. Keep monitoring and send updates. Kellen ended the call and pulled up the security app on his phone. The live feed showed 3 figures moving through the darkened hallways of the executive floor where his office was located. They carried duffel bags and wore ski masks. Amateur work. He recognized one immediately, despite the disguise. The height, the slight limp from the recently healed wrist injury, the expensive watch visible beneath the sleeve of his black jacket. Bo Calloway hadn't even bothered to remove his Patek Philippe before committing a felony. Kellen called Silas as he grabbed his car keys. They've made their move, he said when Silas answered. Office building. 3 men, including Calloway. I'm 10 minutes out, Silas replied. Police. Already en route. Have our lawyer meet us there. On it. Be careful, Kellen. The drive to his office building took 12 minutes. By the time Kellen arrived, 3 police cars were parked outside, lights flashing. He parked and approached the officer controlling access to the building. I'm Kellen Vance. He identified himself. This is my company. What's the situation? The officer, a solid man in his 40s, straightened. Mr. Vance, we have 3 suspects in custody. Caught them in the act of vandalizing the executive floor. They had paint, hammers, and some kind of acid. Would have done significant damage if your security system hadn't alerted us so quickly. I'd like to see them, Kellen said. "They're being processed for transport, but I can take you in." Detective Barnes is running the scene. The officer escorted Kellen through the lobby and up to the executive floor. The damage was contained to the hallway outside his office. Red paint splashed on walls. A few broken light fixtures, the beginning of what would have been more extensive vandalism if they hadn't been interrupted. Detective Barnes, a stern woman with short gray hair, greeted Kellen with a nod. "Mr. Vance, perfect timing. We've got the 3 vandals in separate rooms for questioning. One of them is apparently someone you know. Bo Calloway." Kellen confirmed. The detective's eyebrows rose. "You knew. I recognized him on the security feed. We have history." "So I've heard. The society pages have been buzzing for months." She gestured for him to follow her to a conference room that had been converted to a temporary holding area. "He's demanding a lawyer and refusing to speak. The other 2 are more cooperative. Apparently Calloway paid them $5,000 each to help trash her office." Through the glass panel in the door, Kellen could see Bo seated at the conference table, hands cuffed, mask removed. His once polished appearance was gone, unshaven, hair disheveled, eyes wild with a mixture of fear and hatred. "I'd like to speak with him," Kellen said. Detective Barnes hesitated. "That's not standard procedure, Mr. Vance. He's under arrest, and you're the victim. Just for a moment. I believe I might be able to get him to cooperate more fully." After a brief consideration, she nodded. 2 minutes. I'll be right outside." Kellen entered the room, closing the door behind him. Bo's head snapped up, his expression contorting with rage when he recognized his visitor. "Come to gloat." Bo spat. Kellen took the seat opposite him, calm and collected as always. "Actually, I came to thank you." "Thank me?" Bo's confusion was evident. "For proving me right." Again, Kellen placed his hands on the table, leaning forward slightly. "Breaking and entering, vandalism, destruction of property, all caught on high-definition security cameras from multiple angles. With your prior assault charge and the SEC investigation still pending, this should guarantee you significant prison time." "Fuck you," Bo hissed, yanking against his handcuffs. "You destroyed my life." "No, Bo. You destroyed your own life. I merely provided the opportunity." Kellen's voice remained level. "You could have stayed in Seattle, started fresh, built something of your own for once. Instead, you chose this." He gestured to the handcuffs, the police outside. "Another impulsive, emotional decision that will cost you everything that remained." "My father will get me out of this," Bo insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. "Will he? After you violated the agreement that saved his company? After you embarrassed the Calloway name yet again?" Kellen shook his head. "Roland is many things, but he's not a fool. He'll cut you loose. It's the only rational business decision." Bo's face paled, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. "What do you want from me? You've taken everything already." "I don't want anything from you, Bo. That's what you've never understood. This isn't a negotiation. It's a conclusion." Kellen stood. "Enjoy prison. I hear it's quite an adjustment for men who've never worked a day in their lives." "Wait," Bo called as Kellen moved toward the door. "This isn't over. You think you've won, but you haven't. People like me always land on our feet." Kellen paused, hand on the doorknob. "People like you rely on family connections, inherited wealth, and the fear of others, none of which you'll have in prison." He turned back. "But by all means, keep telling yourself whatever helps you sleep at night." As Kellen opened the door, Bo made one final, desperate attempt. "She never loved you, you know. Vivian. She told me everything, how boring you were, how she only married you for your money, how she laughed behind your back." The words were meant to wound, to provoke an emotional response. "They failed. I'm aware," Kellen replied simply. "The difference between us, Bo, is that I learned from it." He nodded to Detective Barnes waiting outside. "He's all yours, Detective." As Kellen walked away, Bo's voice echoed down the hallway, now shouting, all pretense of composure gone. "This isn't over, Vance. You hear me? This isn't over." But it was. They both knew in the lobby. Silas had arrived and was speaking with the building's night security team. He broke off when he saw Kellen approaching. "Everything all right?" "Perfect," Kellen confirmed. "The cameras caught everything, every second from multiple angles. Crystal clear footage of Calloway directing the other two to start vandalizing your office specifically. Silas looked pleased. He even looked at the camera at one point, almost like he wanted to be caught. He did in a way. He wanted me to know it was him. His final stand. Kellen checked his watch. What time is the press conference tomorrow? 9 a.m. The business networks are all sending crews. Roland Calloway is expected to make a statement distancing himself and the company from Beau's actions. Good. I want our PR team to release a statement expressing sympathy for the Calloway family, but emphasizing our zero-tolerance policy for criminal behavior. Silas nodded, making notes on his phone. Already drafted, and the SEC announcement should come through mid-morning. The timing couldn't be better. Kellen surveyed the lobby of the building he'd built from nothing. Have the cleanup crew start immediately. I want this place spotless by morning. As they walked out of the building, Silas glanced at his friend. You knew he'd try something like this, didn't you? That's why you upgraded the security system last month. I considered it a possibility, Kellen admitted. Beau has always been predictable in his reactions. He couldn't accept defeat without trying for some kind of revenge, no matter how futile. And now, the final act plays out exactly as planned. The next morning, the news broke across all major networks. Banking heir Beau Calloway arrested in break-in attempt at Vance Enterprises. SEC announces formal charges against former Calloway Capital Roland Calloway, DeSone's son, following latest scandal. By noon, it was over. Beau Calloway, denied bail due to flight risk and the severity of combined charges, was officially in custody awaiting trial. The SEC had filed formal charges that carried potential prison sentences of up to 15 years. And Roland Calloway, in a brief but emotional press conference, had announced that his son would receive no financial or legal support from the family. The fall was complete. The price of betrayal, paid in full. 1 year later, the maximum security correctional facility stood isolated against the autumn landscape, gray walls and razor wire contrasting sharply with the colorful foliage surrounding it. Kellen Vance's luxury sedan looked out of place in the visitors' parking lot. Among the aging cars and budget vehicles, he sat inside his car for several minutes, contemplating whether this visit was necessary. He'd received a letter 3 weeks ago, a request from Beau Calloway for a meeting. His first instinct had been to ignore it, to leave the past buried. But curiosity had won out. After going through the tedious security procedures, Kellen was led to a visitor's room. Unlike the scenes from movies, there were no partitions or telephones. Just a simple room with bolted-down tables and chairs, a guard stationed at each corner. Beau was brought in wearing a standard orange jumpsuit. 9 months in prison had transformed him. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by a hunched posture. He'd lost weight, and his once perfect hair was now close-cropped and showing early gray. The manicured hands that had once reached for Vivian now bore calluses and small scars. He looked up as Kellen entered, surprise evident on his face. You actually came, Beau said as Kellen took the seat across from him. I didn't think you would. Neither did I, Kellen admitted. But your letter suggested you had something important to say. Beau glanced around, lowering his voice. I do, but not what you might expect. I'm listening. Beau leaned forward. I've had a lot of time to think in here. 10 years is a long sentence to reflect on your mistakes. 8 with good behavior, Kellen corrected, plus the 3 years from the SEC charges running concurrently. That was generous of the prosecutor. Still, Beau shrugged. It's a lifetime for someone who never thought they'd see the inside of a prison. He studied Kellen's face. You look well. Business still booming. It is. Kellen saw no reason to elaborate. Of course it is. Beau's smile was bitter. You always win, don't you, Vance? That's why I asked you here. I needed to understand how. How what? How you stayed so calm, so calculated. When you found out about me and Vivian, most men would have lost control. They would have confronted her immediately, made threats, gotten drunk, something. But you... Beau shook his head in reluctant admiration. You turned it into a strategy. You used our mistakes against us perfectly. Kellen considered his response carefully. I built my business from nothing, Calloway. That teaches you patience, planning, and the importance of timing. I applied the same principles to my personal life. That's it. Just business strategy applied to revenge. Not revenge, Kellen corrected. Consequences. There's a difference. Bo fell silent for a moment. Had you heard from her? From Vivian? No. She never tried to contact you again? She knew better than to try. Kellen's tone made it clear the subject was closed. Bo nodded slowly. I saw her once, about a month before I was arrested. She was working at some restaurant, looking like hell. He laughed humorlessly. She asked me for money. Can you believe that? After everything, she thought I'd help her. And did you? No. I couldn't even help myself by then. Bo's expression turned serious. That's actually why I asked you here. I wanted to tell you something, man to man. You were right about me. About everything. I never built anything on my own. Never worked for what I had. I took the easy path every time, including going after your wife. Bo met Kellen's gaze directly. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that you were right. Kellen studied the man across from him. Bo Calloway, once his rival. Once the man who had tried to take everything from him, now reduced to seeking validation from the very person who had orchestrated his downfall. Is that all? Kellen asked. Bo seemed taken aback by the cool response. Yes. I guess it is. Then we're done here. Kellen stood. Goodbye, Calloway. That's it. You have nothing to say to me. Kellen paused. What would be the point? You're exactly where your choices led you. Nothing I say will change that. As he turned to leave, Bo called after him. She wasn't worth it, Vivian. She wasn't worth what happened to either of us. Kellen looked back one final time. This was never about her worth. It was about mine. He left Bo Calloway behind, both literally and figuratively. The man who had once been at the center of the biggest scandal in the city's recent history was now just another inmate, forgotten by society and abandoned by everyone who had once claimed to be his friend. Exactly as Kellen had planned. The small apartment on the city's east side had seen better days. The building's exterior paint was peeling, the security door had a broken lock, and the hallway smelled of cooking odors and something less pleasant. Vivian Vance, she'd kept the name despite everything moved through her cramped kitchen, preparing a simple dinner for one. At 36, she was still beautiful, but in a faded way. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by off-the-rack basics. The salon-perfect hair was now self-colored, hiding the first strands of gray. The manicured nails were short and practical for her work as a waitress. Her phone rang an old model, nothing like the latest smartphone she'd once flaunted. She checked the display with little interest, then answered. Hello, Mom. Her mother's voice came through, concerned as always. Vivian, honey, how are you doing? Your father and I were thinking about you today. I'm fine. The standard response, whether true or not. Just getting dinner ready before my shift. You're still at that restaurant? The Italian place? Valentino's, yes. The tips are decent on weekends. There was a pause. We've been talking, your father and I. We think you should consider moving back home for a while, just until you get back on your feet. The suggestion was not new. It had been offered repeatedly over the past year, always politely declined. I appreciate that, Mom, but I'm doing okay here. I've got my routine, my job. Things are stable. Another pause. We saw Kellen in the business section yesterday. His company is expanding again. New building downtown. Vivian's hand tightened on her cheap wine glass. I don't read the business section anymore. Of course, honey. I just thought. Well, it's been over a year now. Maybe if you reached out. No. The response was immediate and firm. That's never going to happen, Mom. You know that. People forgive Vivian. Even someone as hurt as Kellen might. Not him. Vivian took a sip of her wine, needing the fortification. You don't know him like I do. Kellen doesn't forgive. Ever. The conversation shifted to safer topics: her father's garden, her sister's children, community news from back home. When it ended, Vivian sat in the quiet of her small apartment, memories flooding back despite her best efforts to keep them at bay. She'd lost everything: the luxury, the status, the security. Most painfully, she'd lost the respect of the social circle that had once fawned over her as Kellen Vance's wife. Former friends crossed the street to avoid her. Acquaintances pretended not to recognize her when she served them at the restaurant. She was a cautionary tale, whispered about at charity galas and country club luncheons. That's what happens when you betray Kellen Vance. Her phone buzzed with a text from her manager. Need you to come in early tonight. Jennifer called out sick. Another late night for barely enough money to cover her share of the rent. She texted back her agreement, finished her meager dinner, and began preparing for work. This was her life now. The price of her betrayal, paid daily. The new Vance Enterprises headquarters dominated the downtown skyline, 30 stories of glass and steel, a testament to Kellen's continued success. His office on the top floor offered an even more impressive view than his previous location. The entire city spread out before him. Silas entered without knocking, their friendship long past such formalities. At 51, he showed more gray in his beard now, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. The Anderson contract is signed, he announced, dropping into his usual chair. That makes 3 major acquisitions this quarter. Good. Kellen turned from the window. What about the Tokyo expansion? Moving forward as planned. The local team is excellent. Silas studied his friend. You seem restless today. Kellen shrugged. Just thinking about. I visited Callaway last week. Silas's eyebrows shot up. You went to the prison? Why didn't you tell me? It was a personal matter. And? What did he want? To tell me I was right. About him, about everything. Kellen returned to his desk, examining a model of their next building project. He's a broken man. Good, Silas said firmly. After what he tried to do to you, he deserves worse. Perhaps. Kellen's expression was thoughtful. I also drove by Vivian's apartment yesterday. Now Silas was truly surprised. Why would you do that? Curiosity. I wanted to see what became of her. And she works double shifts at Valentino's. Lives with 2 roommates in a building that should probably be condemned. Drives a 15-year-old Honda when she can afford the gas. Silas leaned forward. Are you feeling sorry for her? No. Kellen's response was immediate and genuine. Just confirming that the consequences fit the actions. And do they? Perfectly. Kellen checked his watch. We should head out. The investors' dinner starts in an hour. As they prepared to leave, Silas asked the question that had been on his mind. Are you happy, Kellen? Truly happy with how everything turned out. Kellen considered the question as he gathered his things. His business was thriving, more successful than ever. His reputation was solid gold. The betrayal that had threatened to undermine everything he'd built had instead become the catalyst for greater success. Happy isn't the right word, he finally answered. Satisfied, vindicated, proven right. You haven't dated since the divorce. Not one woman. I've been busy. Bullshit, Silas countered. You've been avoiding it. Not everyone is like Vivian, you know. I'm aware. Kellen headed for the door. When I'm ready, I'll consider it. On my terms. They took Kellen's car to the restaurant, a sleek black Mercedes that purred through the evening traffic. As they merged onto the highway, Kellen felt a sense of completion wash over him. 1 year ago, his world had been shaken by betrayal. He'd discovered his wife's affair, faced public humiliation, and been challenged by a rival who thought himself untouchable. Now, Bo Calloway sat in a prison cell, forgotten by the world that had once celebrated him. Vivian struggled through a life devoid of the luxury she'd taken for granted. And Kellen himself had not only survived but thrived, turning potential disaster into triumph through careful planning and unwavering resolve. As the city lights blurred past his window, Kellen allowed himself a rare smile. The symmetry was perfect, the justice poetic. Something amusing, Silas asked, noticing the expression. Just thinking about how things work out. Kellen accelerated, the powerful engine responding instantly. Betrayal has a price, and I always collect. In the end, that was the simple truth. Every choice had consequences. Every betrayal, a price, and Kellen Vance never gave discounts.